The courtroom was quiet, heavy with decades of unspoken anger. A winter sun streamed through high windows, casting a silver glow on the polished oak bench where justice would soon be administered. At one end sat Janelle Brown, serene, unruffled, yet bearing the burden of decades of promises, unkept and sacrifices unheeded. Across from her, Kody Brown fidgeted uncomfortably, his bravado shattering beneath the truth that this day, this battle, was no longer his to command. This wasn't about land, it wasn't about money, it was about control, and who had used it for much too long. Kody had constructed an empire of loyalty and coercion for years, making everyone, Janelle included, believe that family alone was reason enough to give up contracts, titles, and paper trails. But now, the very same woman he had underestimated came back with witnesses, documents, and a quiet determination to lay it all bare. The bailiff ordered the court to assemble. The clock ticked on, and as the judge opened a sealed envelope with the verdict, Janelle's heart didn't flutter. Regardless of what it held, one thing was already certain: she had learned Kody's game, and she was finally prepared to beat him at it. The courtroom was a cathedral of consequences, vaulted ceilings ringing with the gravity of unresolved business, gleaming wood benches filled with nosy observers, and the subtle thrum of tension hanging in the air. It was not another family squabble. It was the realization of a decade or more of shattered trust, blurred lines, and financial deception dressed up as family harmony. Across the table from the plaintiff, Janelle Brown remained still as stone, her hands folded demurely in her lap, calm as a summer breeze outside, but boiling beneath the surface with a tempest, not of rage, but of intent. It was the day for which she had been training since the gaps in Kody's vows had widened to irreparability. Next to her, lawyer Miss Ward thumbed through color-coded binders, filled with evidence painstakingly gathered for years. Receipts for payments, emails, texts, the crumbs of a broken promise never kept. Across the table, Kody Brown rested back in his chair, a professional smirk working its way across the corners of his mouth. Next to him, Robin muttered something intended to comfort, but even she could not keep from flashing a burst of concern in her eyes. Their argument was easy. There was no contract, only family plans and changing priorities. Court is now in session, the bailiff declared. When Judge Harriet Monroe came in and sat down, the room stood in silent compliance. The judge's eyes swept around the courtroom, keen, evaluating, unwavering. This wasn't a family discussion anymore. Words here wouldn't disappear into thin air. They would be written down, quoted, and measured. Every vow, every assertion, every explanation would be analyzed and documented. And for Janelle, that was precisely what she needed. Because for the first time ever, Kody's words would not vanish into memory, they would be proof. The tension in the courtroom shifted as Judge Monroe pushed up her glasses and nodded towards the plaintiff's table. Miss Ward, you may go ahead with your opening statement. Janelle's attorney, a composed woman with a confident air that asserted itself the moment she stood up, was the center of attention. Your Honor, she started, advancing. This case is not one of bitterness or revenge. It is one of accountability. My client, Mrs. Janelle Brown, invested financially and in large part in that dream, a dream they shared in which they called Coyote Pass. She did so based upon guarantees, verbal, written, and recorded, that she would have an equal portion when the land was split. Miss Ward stopped and looked at the jury, her tone firm and strong. We will have bank statements, text messages, family planning memos, and video evidence, all demonstrating that Kody Brown accepted her input and promised her rightful share. But when the fantasy collapsed, when relationships crumbled, Mr. Brown tried to revise history and eliminate Janelle's claim. The courtroom murmured quietly as she finished. This trial isn't about vengeance. It's about making sure that the sacrifices of one woman aren't disregarded just because the man who had profited now decides to forget them. And now the defense. Kody's lawyer, Mr. Hollister, stood up slowly, adjusting his jacket. Your Honor, this case has been constructed on misunderstandings and assumption. Never was there an agreement that was binding, no contracts signed, and no intention to defraud. These were family negotiations, dynamic, changing, and motivated by trust. Mr. Brown acted in the best interests of the whole family unit. Two narratives now faced the court, one of pledged equality, the other of familial motives. One would remain after evidence was weighed. The courtroom lights faded a bit as a projector hummed on. On the screen, a meticulous spreadsheet shone, columns of dates, payment types, and transaction values, going back more than a few years. This was Exhibit A, and it was the foundation of Janelle's case. Miss Ward moved forward assertively. Your Honor, these are the recorded payments from my client, Mrs. Janelle Brown, toward the purchase, preparation, and future development of Coyote Pass. Each dollar here was taken from her own accounts, not from a common family fund, not from combined resources, but from her own savings. She jabbed with a laser pen as the figures came into view. $15,000. Down payment for land surveyor fees, $8,300. Site preparation and soil testing, $12,000. Legal documentation and zoning permits, $24,000. Infrastructure contributions for utilities. Each entry was backed by bank statements and receipts, neatly organized into binders. And next to many of those transactions were text message screenshots from Kody himself. We'll square this when the lots are divided. Or you're ahead for now, but it'll all balance out. Mr. Brown, Miss Ward addressed Kody. Do you deny sending these messages? Kody shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his tone less confident now. No, but those were conversations within the context of a family plan. Things changed, but numbers don't change. Numbers don't disappear with memory, or evaporate with changing relationships. Numbers are truth, stubborn, silent, undeniable. The courtroom sensed truth settling. For the first time, it was no longer a question of he said, she said. It was a matter of cold documented fact, and fact was tipping heavily in Janelle's direction. Your Honor, Miss Ward declared. The plaintiff would now like to enter Exhibit B, a 2018 family meeting video recording that was taken by TLC cameras during a planning session for Coyote Pass. The lights faded once more as a giant monitor rolled into the middle of the courtroom. Everyone shifted toward the screen. The video opened with familiar faces around a long dinner table. Kody, Janelle, Mary, Christine, and Robin, their faces painted with hope and faith. This was before the cracks, before the betrayals. Janelle's voice came from the speakers. I'll put more money in now if it lets us get started sooner. But I need to know I'll have my lot when we share. Kody, sitting at the head of the table, nodded firmly. Sure thing. You're contributing more. You'll be ahead when the time is right. That's just right. The courtroom leaned forward, even the judge slightly. The video went on, with the family making plans, with Kody thanking Janelle again and again for her additional efforts. He even drew a hasty map, naming sections with each of the wives' names. Beside one corner lot, noted with a beautiful view, he wrote Janelle. Mr. Brown asked Miss Ward, pausing the video, is this your handwriting? Kody hesitated. Yes, but these were just talks. Nothing was definite. Yet you said you'll be ahead over and over. Yes. She pushed. Yes. But plans change. Plans could change, but promises uttered into being are more difficult to remove. And here, on the recorder, in front of witnesses and media, Kody's guarantees were plain and inescapable. For the jury, this was more than a discussion. This was evidence. Evidence that Janelle's trust had been established with Kody's own words. The courtroom drama intensified as Kody Brown was summoned to the stand. He straightened his tie, threw a hasty look toward Robin, and then met the questioning with tightly rehearsed calm. But Miss Ward wasn't going to let him wrap himself in charm or evasiveness. Not today. Mr. Brown, she started, moving slowly in front of the jury. You've used the term our land and our projects when talking about Coyote Pass again and again. When you said our, who were you speaking about? Kody cleared his throat. The family. All of us. We were working together towards a common goal. Miss Ward stepped closer. And yet, Mrs. Brown's name was never put on the deed. No written contract. No equity records. Anything. If this was really our project, why wasn't her name on every document of record? Kody fidgeted in his chair. We didn't need legal papers. We trusted each other. Trusted one another. Miss Ward slowly turned back to the jury, and when that trust was shattered, where was she? There was silence in the room. She then showed a printed text message on the overhead screen. You'll be ahead when we divide. What do you mean by ahead, Mr. Brown? Kody sighed. It meant she'd be first in line when the lots were split. Miss Ward nodded. Thought about. Not promised, not sealed, just thought about. She spun back toward the bench. Your Honor, our words and thought mean nothing if not followed by action. They're meant to placate, not safeguard. and in that instant the fantasy fractured. Ours was never equal. It was always conditional. And Janelle had spent years putting stock in a dream, constructed of words that disappeared when reality set in. When Robin Brown was summoned to the witness stand, the tension in the courtroom changed. She wasn't the accused, but her place in the narrative was irrefutable. Her presence, once the glue that held together the family, now seemed like a missing piece of the puzzle in plain sight. She moved slowly to the witness chair, clasping her hands tightly, glancing for a moment in Kody's direction, before focusing on the judge. Mrs. Brown, Miss Ward started softly. You attended most of the family meetings concerning the Coyote Pass project, right? Yes, Robin answered quietly. I was at most of them. And during those meetings, do you remember Janelle voicing her expectations on ownership and equity? Robin nodded. Yes, she was very specific that she desired an area of land commensurate with her contribution. She brought it up frequently. Miss Ward moved a step closer. And did you ever suggest things that had any impact on how or when that land might be distributed? Robin paused, looking at Kody once more before answering. I did. I proposed that we wait before sealing anything until the family was stabilized. I thought it would avoid conflict. So, to clarify, Miss Ward went on, her voice firm but calm, your proposal specifically held up the process that would have guaranteed Janelle's share. Robin's tone quivered. Yes, I guess it did. The courtroom fell silent. Even Kody's assertive stance wavered. Good intentions can be wrapped around them, but results don't. Robin may not have intended to steal Janelle's rights from her, but by serving as the gatekeeper, she'd helped slam the door shut on Janelle's future. And for the first time, even Robin appeared to understand that good intentions don't cancel out consequence. Just when the courtroom believed it had witnessed the most compelling item of evidence, Miss Ward reappeared in the middle of the room, with a thin blue binder. Your Honor, she announced, her tone firm but electrified. Exhibit C. An internal draft of the Coyote Pass Division Plan, created and distributed by Mr. Brown and his colleagues in 2019. The projector glowed again, and a highly detailed color-coded map of the property appeared. Each lot was identified by initials, MB for Mary, CB for Christine, RB for Robin, and a big viewable corner plot identified as JB for Janelle. Beside it, typed out in bold letters, were the words Priority Allocation. Mr. Brown, Miss Ward paced deliberately. Is this the original division plan you prepared? Kody's lawyer shifted restlessly. It was a preliminary draft. Nothing was set in stone. But the intention was unequivocal, wasn't it? She urged. Janelle's efforts made her a priority stakeholder. Isn't that what this letter states? Kody hesitated, his face growing tight. At the time, yes, that was the plan. And what did change? Circumstances, he grumbled. Or maybe, Miss Ward retorted, control. The courtroom buzzed. Paper such as this, drawn up with Kody's own hand, was hard to characterize as family chit-chat. It evidenced planning, order and recognition of Janelle's stake. Paper does not lie. It documents intent long after memory lapses and rationalizations change. This was not a clouded dream. It was a blueprint of a vow that Kody made and subsequently attempted to dig up. As the map remained on the screen, Janelle gazed at it in silent vindication. Each color-coded piece of land, each typed letter, was evidence she had never thought possible about her worth. It had been put down, recorded and acknowledged. As Mary Brown was summoned to the witness stand, a quiet fell over the courtroom. Among all the witnesses, Mary bore the most extensive history. The initial wife, the one who had been present since the beginning. If anyone grasped the development of vows, the changes in dynamic, and the significance of words spoken over decades, it was she. She moved the microphone aside carefully before continuing to talk. I was present for most of the discussions regarding Coyote Pass, she started, her tone calm, but laced with sorrow. And I can assure you, Janelle didn't merely contribute. She undertook that project. Miss Ward took a step forward. Can you clarify what you mean by that? Mary nodded. While the rest of us were conservative, Janelle put up money. She paid surveyors, utilities and lawyer fees, things that most of us never even considered. And she did it because she trusted in the plan. She trusted in what Kody said. Did Kody ever recognize her contributions in your presence? Yeah, Mary said with no hesitation. He explained to her, repeatedly, that she'd be ahead when the lots were parceled out. We all heard it. It wasn't a secret. Defense attorneys attempted to discredit her testimony. Mrs. Brown, isn't it true? Your present relationship with Mr. Brown would prejudice your opinion. Mary's eyes grew hard. Yes, it might taint my perception. With honesty, I was there. I listened to the promises, and I witnessed how they were broken. Mary's testimony was not passionate or sensational. It was heavy. It was from a person who had lived the narrative from the inside and witnessed it happen bit by painful bit. And as she spoke, one thing was certain. This wasn't merely Janelle's battle. It was a reckoning years in the making. The following exhibit was not dramatic or showy, but it was heart-wrenching. Miss Ward approached the bench, with a thick sheaf of printed-out emails, some highlighted and others with handwritten notes in the margin. Your Honor, she began. Exhibit 10 consists of email exchanges between Mr. Brown and Mrs. Brown from 2018 to 2022. They give a direct look at the promises made, and the reassurances that followed. The lights went down once more as one message flashed on the courtroom screen. It was dated 2:08 a.m., May 14, 2020, from Janelle Brown to Kody Brown. Subject: My contributions. Kody, I'm getting worried. I've invested almost $80,000 into this project so far, and there's not even a written contract yet. I need some kind of guarantee that I'm not just investing money in nothing. A response came 2 hours later, from Kody Brown: You're not investing in nothing. We're like family. I'll get it done when we do break ground. Your money is secure. Miss Ward addressed Kody. Mr. Brown, did you compose this email? Yes, he confessed. And did you ever make it right? Kody sighed. No, we never did break ground. Because the project fell through. Or because you had a change of heart. Because things change. Kody grumbled, his eyes averted from hers. Midnight promises tend to ring with the sound of commitment, but they're no stronger than the follow-through. Every email Miss Ward shared told the same story. Janelle seeking clarity, Kody replying with vague reassurance. Never once did he dispute her contribution. Never once did he dispute her expectation of ownership. And now, under oath, those computer crumbs revealed a more incriminating story than any speech ever might. Kody knew, from the very beginning, that Janelle wanted a return, and he let her think so. As the lights in the courtroom came on, Miss Ward motioned for a large, rolled-up document to be brought up to the front. Your Honor, she declared. Exhibit E, the original map of the Coyote Pass property, done during the planning stage. It was not just any sheet of paper. This map was the tangible form of the dream that had begun it all, and for that matter, the most concrete evidence yet. Two bailiffs carefully spread out the map across the length of a table at the front of the courtroom. It was many feet long, filled with boundary lines and elevation marking, and accurate measurements. Colored ink demarcated the land into separate parcels, each of which bore initials. And there, in bold blue letters, halfway up the northern ridge, were 3 words: Janelle, View Corridor. Mr. Brown, Miss Ward started, moving cautiously around the map. Whose is this handwriting? Kody fidgeted in his seat. It's mine, he admitted softly. And why mark that section Janelle? Because that's the lot she desired, he replied. And I instructed the surveyor to reserve the view for her. So to make things certain, Miss Ward prodded. At the time this map was created, you wanted Janelle to own this parcel. Correct. Kody paused. At that time, yes. But she was never made the owner of it, even though she funded a lot of the work. No. The room became heavy with silence, as everyone looked at proof. This wasn't conjecture. This wasn't a misunderstood conversation. This was Kody's own handwriting on land that he had previously vowed to Janelle. Land doesn't lie. It recalls who trod upon it, who bought it, and who was promised its ground. And on this map, history was put in ink. Evidence that Janelle's assertion wasn't a fantasy. It was ever a plan. Finally, after days of impassioned testimony and compelling displays, it was time to face the cold, unyielding reality. The numbers. Miss Ward walked before the jury, with a thick binder marked Financial Summary. Coyote Pass. Within was the tale no one could refute. One set not in words or assurances, but in dollars and cents. Your Honor, she started. These records were compiled from bank statements, wire transfers, and invoices, are each of the documented payments Mrs. Brown made toward the Coyote Pass project. The amounts came on the courtroom screen, one by one, each more breathtaking than the last $15,000. Down payment on land, $8,300. Soil tests and land examination, $12,000. Zoning permits and legal paper, $24,000. Utility line extensions and infrastructure, $5,800. Environmental studies and sites, $21,320. 13 cents. Maintenance of the property, taxes, and incidental expenses. Total $87,420. 13 cents. All out of Janelle's own money. These were not gifts, Miss Ward reiterated. They were not charitable gifts to a family fund generally. These were specific, documented payments that were made with an expectation that Mrs. Brown would have an equal interest in the property. Kody's lawyer sought to refute. Some of those upgrades were for the benefit of the entire family, not specifically Mrs. Brown. Miss Ward didn't blink. Right. And that's the very reason she should be reimbursed, because the whole family reaped the rewards of her investment. The judge slowly nodded, thumbing through the binder as if every receipt represented a nail slamming the case shut. Numbers can't lie. They don't alter their tale under duress, and they don't forget what they're supposed to deliver. Every credit in that book was a chunk of Janelle's trust, concrete evidence that although other people provided words, she constructed the vision with her checkbook. And now, the arithmetic itself was crying out for justice. When Janelle Brown finally did come to the stand, the room changed. Away went the biting legal jousting and the chill accuracy of papers. Now the pulse of the case came out. She fiddled with the microphone and breathed, her hands shaking very slightly before flattening in her lap. The courtroom held its collective breath in silence. Mrs. Brown, Miss Ward started softly. Do you have any way of describing to the court why you made those donations? Janelle nodded, her voice firm but choked with feeling. Because I believed. I believed in the dream we all spoke about, creating a home for each of us on that property. It wasn't real estate to me. It was security, legacy, a future for my kids. She stopped, her gaze flicking momentarily in Kody's direction. I trusted him. Each time he said, "We'll make it right," I trusted him. Each time he told me I'd be ahead, I believed that as well. I wasn't looking for anything more, just what was right. Her voice grew deeper, to a near whisper. I waited for years because I believed family was supposed to matter. But commitments are meaningless if they vanish when things get tough. Miss Ward leaned forward. And what is it that you are seeking from this court today? Janelle's response was easy. I want respect. I want the court to understand that what I provided wasn't a gift. It was an investment in a future that I was promised. Her statements weren't hateful. They were raw, honest, and human. Janelle wasn't battling over money. She was battling for recognition, for respect, for the acknowledgement that loyalty was worth something. And as she spoke, even those who once doubted her began to feel it. The quiet storm of a woman who had finally found her voice. With the evidence against them mounting heavily, Kody's lawyers changed course. The following morning, the courtroom was abuzz with the sound of papers rustling and hushed gossip as Mr. Hollister, Kody's lawyer, stood at the bench, binder under arm. The massive leather-bound volume, bearing the inscription, "The Family Fund." Your Honor, he started, voice strong and measured. The defense will show that those funds were not separate individual investments, but rather part of a collective family fund. Money spent for the group's good, not for individual profit. He opened the binder and showed her colored charts and ledger lines. These accounts represent payments from several family members toward joint expenses, utility bills, maintenance on the property, vacations, and household expenses. The distinctions between the individual and group contributions were deliberately fuzzy, because this was never a business, this was a family. Mr. Hollister addressed the jury. Mrs. Brown was never guaranteed a legal interest. She volunteered to partake in a shared vision. And visions, as we all know, don't include contracts. Miss Ward stood for cross-examination, her face serene but cutting. Mr. Hollister, are you arguing that since the boundaries were unclear, there is no accountability? I'm saying, he replied, that in the context of a plural family, traditional notions of ownership do not hold. Miss Ward proceeded slowly toward the jury. And yet the defense's own evidence demonstrates that Mr. Brown prepared spreadsheets, maps, and written plans, all listing Janelle as a priority stakeholder. You can't wipe out intent just by labeling it family. The family fund defense was sophisticated, a try to get the waters just murky enough to raise an eyebrow. But intentions, once put on paper, have a nasty habit of rearing up again. And the more the jury examined those blurry lines, the more they could make out something distinct. The more Kody attempted to retreat behind the concept of family, the more it seemed like evasion. Following weeks of testimony, cross-examination, and evidence that stripped away layers of promises spanning years, the courtroom reached its final act. Closing argument. This was the final opportunity for both sides to craft the tale the jury would take with them into deliberation. Miss Ward began first. She slowly made her way to the middle of the room, her eyes sweeping the jurors, her voice firm but steady. This case, she began, is not about bitterness. It's about fairness. It's about a woman who invested her money, her trust, and her future into a promise that was never honored. Mrs. Brown did everything that was asked of her, and more. And every step of the way, Mr. Brown reassured her with words like "we'll make it right, and you'll be ahead." Those aren't just words. In the eyes of the law, those are representations, and representations have consequences. She pointed to the exhibits piled on the evidence table, the ledger, the emails, the video, the map. Every one of these things says the same thing. Janelle wasn't a donor. She was an investor, and she deserves the equity, recognition, and compensation she was promised. And then it was Mr. Hollister's turn. The defense takes the position, he asserted, that there was no contract, no legal agreement. This was a family, not a corporation. And families don't function on ledgers and clauses. They function on trust, shared dreams, and changing circumstances. Miss Ward's response was biting. Families may work on trust, but courts work on evidence. And the evidence indicates that promises were made, money was received, and expectations were established. As the lawyers sat, the courtroom fell silent once more. The path to justice had been messy and long, but now it was up to the jury to compare words and promises and reality. The last day of the trial dawned with a nearly spiritual quietness. The courtroom that had been alive with fiery arguments and tearful depositions was now frozen in time. All eyes, the jurors, the spectators, and the faces of the lawyers, were on Judge Monroe as she walked in the courtroom, carrying a sealed envelope. Within it was the verdict that would determine the fate not just of Coyote Pass, but also the legacy of promises that had shaped the Brown family for generations. "All rise," the bailiff shouted. The judge sat down, cleared her glasses, and unfolded the paper deliberately. A heartbeat of silence beat by before she spoke. "This court determines that Mrs. Janelle Brown is entitled to equitable restitution in the sum of $87,420.13 plus interest thereon," read Judge Monroe. "Additionally, if development on the Coyote Pass property happens in the next years, Mrs. Brown is to be given first right of refusal on the parcel she identified as her priority lot." A collective gasp resounded throughout the courtroom. Janelle closed her eyes, a lone tear coursing down her cheek, not one of sorrow, but release. She had done it. She had earned her worth as sister. Kody once dominated. Kody sat stone still, his proud bearing deflated. Robin tightened her grip on his hand, but he didn't reciprocate. The empire he had constructed on fleeting promises and wavering words had been whipped and found wanting. Mary in the gallery offered Janelle a quiet nod of fellowship. Christine smiled quietly from the back row. Revenge had never been Janelle's desire. What she desired, and ultimately achieved, was justice. In a world where words had been manipulated and trust broken, she recovered her dignity, her strength, and her voice. And for the first time in years, the game no longer belonged to Kody, it was hers.